Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Dan Hiscock, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Commodore Alison Westwood. Today we commemorate the 105th anniversary of the Battle of Megiddo, which was the last major offensive in the Sinai-Palestine campaign of the First World War. What became known as the Battle of Megiddo began in the pre-dawn hours of the 19th of September 1918, when British infantry with artillery and air support smashed a 12-kilometre gap through thinly held Ottoman positions on the coastal plains of Palestine. The Desert Mounted Corps, commanded by Lieutenant General Sir Harry Chauvel, advanced the gap made by the infantry, starting one of the greatest cavalry actions in history. By the morning of the 20th of September, British cavalry units occupied the ancient battlefield of Megiddo and had also reached Nazareth. Over the next 2 days, Australian light horse units were involved in the capture of El Auful, Baisan and Jenin, after which the light horsemen of the 4th Brigade turned north and captured the vital railway line and the town of Sumac at the southern end of the Sea of Galilee. The same day, a man in the Transjordan fell to a composite division known as Chaytor's Force after its commander, Major General Edward Chaytor. The Battle of Megiddo was over, but the war continued for another month. Ottoman forces withdrew into Syria and were pursued to Damascus and on to Aleppo. The war in the Middle East came to an end on the 31st of October 1918 with the signing of the Armistice of Mudros. The Sinai-Palestine campaign had cost the Australians 4,851 casualties, of which 1,374 had died in battle or from wounds or disease. The story of just one of these, Trooper Herbert John Vigors, will be told shortly. This evening we are honoured to acknowledge Mr Stephen Worrell, Managing Director of Microsoft Australia and New Zealand, and the senior leadership team, accompanied by Mark Donaldson, recipient of the Victoria Cross for Australia, and Brigadier General Jan Latil, Commander of the French Armed Forces in New Caledonia, accompanied by Colonel Joel Dooley, Australian Defence Attaché to France designate, and their accompanying delegations. As always, we welcome the veterans who were served, those still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL Land Service Clubs Association, and we welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of St Mary's Primary School from Armidale, New South Wales. Now, if you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem.
Golden soil and wealth for toil, oh,
Students, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of July 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read just one of the stories from the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Trooper Herbert John Vigors. Herbert Vigors was born in 1873 in the town of Canberra near Dubbo in New South Wales. Known as Herb, he was the eldest of 4 children born to Richard and Emma Vigors. Herb grew up in the Central West where he developed a passion for horses. He quickly gained a reputation as a talented horseman and moved to Granville in Sydney to work as a jockey and horse trainer. In 1895, he married Charlotte Lee, with whom he later had a son named Jack. Despite being in his 40s when the First World War broke out, Herb Vigors was determined to enlist, joining the Australian Imperial Force in October of 1915. He was assigned to the Imperial Camel Corps and commenced a short period of training in Australia. He embarked for active service in July the following year, sailing from Sydney on board the troop ship Mongolia. After several weeks at sea, Vigors arrived in Egypt and was taken on strength of the Camel Corps. He joined his comrades in the Sinai Desert at the end of August and took part in his first major battle a few months later when Anzac Mounted Division attacked Turkish positions in the village of Megiddo. The action was followed by a similar attack at Rafah in January 1917, which opened the way for the expulsion of the Turkish forces from the Sinai. Following his success, Vigors and his comrades joined the pursuit of the enemy into Palestine, eventually halting at the city of Gaza in March 1917. Fighting alongside the Light Horse, the Camel Corps suffered heavy casualties at Gaza after being confronted with superior Turkish defence positions, which repulsed 2 Allied attempts to take the city. While plans for a third attack were underway, Vigors became ill and was removed from his unit to recover. He spent the months which followed enduring periods in and out of hospital before being transferred to a position in the depot behind the lines to regain his health. In July 1918, Vigors' unit was disbanded, with camels having proven to be a less practical mode of transport for the troops. As a result, the Cameliers were dispersed to form 2 new light horse units. Vigors was transferred to the 15th Light Horse Regiment and began a short period of training. 2 months later, the fledgling 15th Light Horse was drawn into its first major battle when Allied forces attacked the ancient fortress of Megiddo. The battle was successful, tearing a hole in the Turks' front line, which allowed Vigors and his comrades to advance into enemy territory. Within 24 hours, the enemy's position began to collapse, allowing Allied forces to begin a rapid advance on Turkish-held city of Damascus. Vigors and his comrades reached the outskirts of the city within days of their success of Megiddo. As they made their way into the suburbs, they became under fire from Turkish troops garrisoned in the city. Realising the end was near, many of the enemy surrendered at the advancing light horsemen, allowing them to continue on to the city with little resistance. While his comrades disarmed and secured prisoners, Vigors and 3 other men were accompanied by 2 French troops and proceeded to Damascus. En route to the city, they discovered a large group of the enemy who they called upon to surrender. As the Turks prepared to do so, the French soldiers randomly fired their revolvers, causing Turkish troops to open fire in retaliation. Caught in the volley of bullets, Vigors and his comrades were shot and killed instantly. The following day, Damascus fell to the Allies, signalling the defeat of the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East. Vigors and his comrades were reburied in the city shortly after, where they lie today. After the war, Vigors' widow and son chose to pay tribute to him with a short poem placed in the Sydney Morning Herald. It read, "Today brings back sad memories of a brave soldier gone west, and those who think of him today are those who loved him best. Trooper Herb Vigors was 48 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right amongst 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Trooper Herbert John Vigors, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We'll leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.